can you share a pivotal moment in your life that led you to explore consciousness, neuroscience, and vibrational medicine?
Right. Those three, that's three pivotal moments at very different times in my life. Consciousness was, I was very young. I just imagine myself looking up to all these adults. I'm an only child, and so I was often surrounded by adults. So I'd often be listening to adult conversations. And I remember how often they would be talking about happiness, and yet I never really thought any of them were very happy. And there was something else. It was also in their choices. I was also curious about the choices different people made and why they made them, especially the ones that they hoped would bring them happiness and then didn't. So from a very young age, I was kind of trying to figure out the world around me. And so I didn't have the word, obviously, consciousness at the time. But then when I heard the word consciousness, even without fully knowing the definition, I thought, that's it. It's in that realm. It's in that's calling me, whatever it is. So the pivotal moment to explore consciousness happened very young. Neuroscience came after I'd already started a degree in social sciences, a large part of which was psychology. And I got 3 months into that program, and the first assignment was handed out, and I had no incentive to do this assignment, and I stepped back and walked away from the lecture theatre, and I thought, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. So I dropped out of university, and I ended up making sandwiches for a year, and then I found this course in neuroscience, and back then it wasn't as common as it is now, and I was so surprised that you could do a degree just to understand the brain and the nervous system. And so that gave me something concrete, and I really wanted to be working with something concrete because, as I say, everything else to me in psychology felt like opinions and theory. And the last one was vibrational medicine. Yeah, these are all quite turning points in my life. So vibrational medicine came into my life when my dad was ill and he had cancer, and so we went the traditional route. And I just despaired at the whole cancer treatment and protocol. And I also was working in pharma. I was working in pharma advertising and sales. And yeah, the despair was pretty much overwhelming, and I knew there has to be another way. Then a book came out, it was really popular at the time, which was called You Are What You Eat. And it started to change, you started to understand disease from a very different perspective. And from there, I came across emotional freedom technique in a book. It was just like a appendix chapter, and I was like holding it and following the instructions and tapping, and thought, I don't know what this is or what it's going to do. And then the next day I had this kind of eureka experience, and then that was it. So there was no turning back. I explored that. I explored Reiki and other things, and I was on my way. And vibrational medicine was what I was interested in. And then that led to shamanism many years down the line. But from that turning point, that just appendix in some book I was reading.
It's so beautiful how sometimes life can turn things around just by one piece of media, if you will, right? Whether it is a book or sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it is a person that we talk to that can really shift our minds into a very different direction. And it opens up a possibility that we never thought was possible, right? Just like you said, you were so disappointed by the Western medicine, how they handle cancer, just like they handle pretty much every medical case that is widely misunderstood in my personal perspective and opinion and experience with illness, and with how countries like China, for example, with Chinese medicine, on the other hand, are handling illnesses and stuff like that. So growing up in Asia, I saw the differences between how we would solve certain problems, health problems, and how they were solved then in the Western world, which I came to when I was around 7. So it was quite a shock seeing that it is actually not about health in a Western world. It is about money. It is all a product that they are trying to sell. And it's oftentimes they are not even interested in your health, really, in you being healthy or becoming healthy. They are thriving on you staying sick, which makes me sick, very sick in my mind and in my heart, because this is really not what we are here for. So can you discuss a moment or discovery during your PhD studies that significantly impacted your understanding of the human mind, which you mentioned just now, and its potential for transformation?
Well, I studied neuroscience for 8 years, so 4 years as a bachelor's, and then I went on to do neuropharmacology, behavioral neuropharmacology, so I was working with rats and different behaviors. And the main takeaway that I got from my PhD was the brain is not where the mind is. So after 8 years, I was able to draw a line under, for so long, thinking, it's all going to be in the brain, and go, this isn't it. It is an energetic field. And I remember my PhD wasn't really that interesting. They just found a new serotonin receptor and we were trying to work out what it did. But I would go to this, I can't remember, animal department. But there was a girl in the lab next to me who was doing social rearing, I think maybe there's another term, and they were looking at the different environments and how that had a different impact on rats. And I remember thinking that was far more interesting to me than the PhD I was working on. They would have one cage that was pretty sparse and then another one that was full of toys and mummy was in there and all of these games to play with. And from that moment, never was I hugely inspired by my own PhD, but I was really interested in that topic. And in a way, ever since I've been studying that, but with humans as opposed to rats, really exploring how much our environment and more has had an impact on our mind. So my PhD was very useful in drawing the line under that avenue of research and going, it wasn't the brain, that wasn't where I was going to find what I was looking for.
Now, I'm getting a little bit curious here. You just mentioned the two different scenarios. What are the results that you could draw from these two scenarios? The mouse cage being sparse, as you say, and the other one where the mummy was there, a lot of toys and stuff like that. So we can draw parallels to human behavior, probably. Can you talk more about that?
I don't remember the details of her project, but I know many people in the department were looking at treatments for depression and to see how effective they were in rats from different environments. And often seeing that even without any treatment, babies brought up in a sparse environment tended to signs of depression far more than rats brought up in a loving, nurturing, playful environment. It's now, of course we get it. We're getting it. But yeah, it was always stood out to me.
But there, I believe, should also be a balance, or must be a balance, if I think scientifically, that if you have too much of stuff in your environment, on the other hand, then it can also lead to depression because it doesn't allow you to stay connected with yourself or with the really important people in your life. So, and I'm thinking about toys particularly. I've seen also the difference between where I grew up or how I grew up, mainly in nature without any toys or very rarely any toys, and coming to Germany and having a ton of toys, like that was like overload. And I've seen how much toys other kids had, and I was like, oh my God, of course I wanted to have that. But now, in retrospect, I think it was better having less, because then it allowed me to really stay connected with myself and with the people that really mattered in my life, instead of being distracted by objects and material things that really have no impact on the transformation that a mind can go through on a positive level.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. I had a client recently who had a young daughter, and she was telling me how much she was having problems with the daughter. They just didn't have a very good relationship. And she was telling me about all the things that she feels, they go to dance and they go to this and they go to the other. And I was saying, I think there's just too much. We need downtime so much to process our experiences, as opposed to just filling our minds with experiences, because most of it happens in the space. That's what they say in meditation, it's all in the space, in the quietness. And now, as much as children are having the toys, it's just a complete mirror of adults with all of our gadgets and those toys, and that's equally as unhealthy. There's no space for the imagination, creativity, connection, reflection, process. It's all just results. we've advanced a lot, but we really do have to take a step back every now and again and say we're really advancing in the right direction.
And that also requires some level of holographic consciousness to not only realize how much you really need in life, but also create the right environment where you can really thrive. Maybe not only you, but also your kids, and being really the role model that you want to see in them. And you talk a lot about holographic consciousness. Can you open up a little box for us and explain what it is, how you work with it, and how significant it is for personal growth?
There are many scientific explanations or definitions of holographic consciousness and the holographic principle, but I keep it very simple in that the whole is made of parts. So there are parts within the whole, and the whole is contained within each of those parts. And I leave it at that. Then there are some other simple ones I can add on, which say exactly the same thing, which are I am that I am, as above, so below, as within, so without, be the change you want to see, are all saying exactly the same thing. And so your point there with children and parents, it does have to go in parallel. We can't expect changes in the children that we're not doing ourselves, because it's all connected. And especially within a family, we're just one unit. And so there's no way you can tell off children for playing with too many toys or being on their gadgets for too long while staring at our phones going, you shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, it can't work. And they'll get very frustrated and we get more frustrated, and so it goes on. So the holographic principle or the holographic consciousness is just literally saying it's all connected. And especially the things that you notice that stand out to you and things that trigger you, and similarly can also be very positive, those things are very prevalent in your field, and that's why you're noticing them so stand out in someone else. It's not that they're really part of someone else, it's that they're reflecting that part of yourself.
What are some common challenges or misconceptions that people usually have when they're trying to understand who they truly are beyond their personal identity and public status?
The greatest challenge I think we all face is delineating between our authentic self and all of the conditioning that we've accumulated, especially from family, then society, culture, and globally. And so authentic self is to really peel back all of those layers and say, I speak from my essence as opposed to speaking from our conditioning. But often we don't know. And sometimes then that's the process of finding out what it is we don't know about ourselves. And being very cautious as well to recognize this could just be conditioning coming in. This could just shape my perspective. I mean, you grew up in the East. It's a very different perspective on life than in the West, and much more holistic and less individuated. And that's a filter with which through the world is looked at. And so the process is so much about slowing down and questioning. That peeling off the layers of the onion is peeling off the conditioning and saying, I think this. Do I really think this? Or do I think this just because everyone around me has thought it? And I can't really see the wood for the trees, so I'm just enmeshed with their thinking as opposed to thinking for myself. And I think, where we're really moving towards is everyone learning to think for themselves, and that is to be an expression of their authentic self.
I find that part particularly brutally difficult, to really dissect or find your authentic self or your true self. What is that even? Because for me personally, identity has been the hardest piece in life, just in general. I felt I never had one, especially when we moved to Germany. That was like a break. The floor was cut off from my feet, so to speak. The roots were cut off. And I lost myself. I didn't know who I was. I had an identity back there, right? Because it was really combined and beautifully fused with the people that were living in that little village. But when we moved to Germany, I was like, it was like a bursting experience with all the things that I've seen that I liked and disliked at the same time. And sometimes I think maybe we don't even have an authentic self because we are bombarded with so many different things. First of all, we are created basically by our parents, not only biologically, but we get everything from them, their perspective, how to do things, how to think, how to judge things, and how to not do things. And I sometimes wonder, do I even have an authentic self? Do I even have that core thing that belongs really to me, that is really my identity? So for someone who is struggling with identity or finding their authentic self, what would you say is the route to go, or to think through, to really dissect the layers of, this is me, this is really me, this is how I want to live, and this is just an opinion of someone else, or this is how my dad wanted me to live, or my mom wanted me to do, how to really find that? Because the brain oftentimes remembers things in weird ways, not very obvious. Like your father's voice will be so indirectly branded in your brain that you don't even recognize, wow, that is my father's voice for the past 40 years that has been talking to me, telling me what to do. And I didn't even realize it was my dad's voice. It is not really me who wants that. So how can we find that authentic self?
Well, I think there's exploring it on an individual basis. For example, your story is very unique, or well, it's not so unique, but it's in the minority to have moved at that age and to move at a pivotal age when you're forming your identity. So that would have kind of knocked you back, and then you have to start again, whereas other people are already on a linear streak. It depends how we define authentic self. For me, I think we're moving towards more and more an expression of our soul. And it's finding out what that soul is, what that voice is, and hearing that, as opposed to, and not being afraid to express that. And that, I think, I'm trying to think how I first recognized authentic self. The first way I realized my authentic self was when I realized how much I was suffering by being in a personality or an identity. Because I realized my personality had been one of pleasing people, making sure everything was okay, being busy, working hard, being a good girl. And then at one point I realized I'm just doing all of that for other people. What do I do for myself? And that was quite a shocking moment, because I realized everything was towards that. And so developing a relationship with oneself is the key to that connection to one's authentic self. And that relationship to oneself gets nurtured, I've found, because the ways we relate to ourselves are the way we eat, the way we move, the way we rest, and the way we speak to ourselves. And it's honing in on each of those parts of our lives and going, how true to myself am I when I do this thing? Am I eating at this time because everyone eats this meal at this time? Am I eating this at this time because everyone eats this at this time? What do I really feel like doing? And starting to bring that into every single activity, every single relationship. Do I really want to be here? Do I really want to be talking about this? And as you start to peel back, then you start hearing that voice, and that authentic self starts to grow. And increasingly we recognize, wow, that's the truest part of me beyond any conditioning. And then just to keep running with that.
And it is really on every single level that we can think of, right? It's not like only the job, for example. Many people associate the authentic self or things that others tell them to be or to do, oftentimes connected to job or school or how you dress and how you look and all that stuff. But I think it goes so much more deeper than that. What you eat, just what you mentioned, it is so multi-leveled and so deep. The thoughts that you're having, how you're feeling, how you're managing your emotions, how you're reacting to different things, it is all parts of your conditioning. And as you said, whenever we are feeling that we feel uncomfortable with being a certain role or person, it might be a hint that this is really not what you are or who you should be, or parts of ourselves that we are trying to hide the most.
I think you're getting to the point where we don't feel good. That's so crucial to identify that's the communication from ourselves that says this doesn't feel good, this job doesn't feel good, this relationship doesn't feel good, why are you still here, or why are you still allowing it to continue as it is? It needs some changes. And that's again the part of listening to ourselves, because we override it and we'll suppress it and stuff it because we think, oh, if I hear it then I'm going to have to do something about it, and maybe if I do something about it they may not like me, or they may do this or they may do that. But I think you get to a point in this process where you can't anymore. There's so many people I've spoken to who said, I was in this job for 12 years and then one day I got up, handed in my notice, and I couldn't do it anymore. And I was in a similar position, that we can't suppress it like probably they could three or 4 decades ago. They just did the same job day in, day out. There's an expansion that's saying you're growing bigger than this shell.
It's very interesting, right? How when we look at the different generations, our parents, for example, they had one job, like my dad, for example, all his life in one job, and he was lucky, if you could say that, right? If that's all that he wanted to do, then that was a lucky situation to remain in one job. But the world has changed so much, especially with AI moving forward so quickly and taking jobs left and right. I think we are at a time where we have a very unique opportunity to really find ourselves and to really live out ourselves, because the mundane and the boring stuff will be taken over by the robots and by AI anyway. So being creative and being a thinker really, and being a doer, first of all, being in creation will be the most important asset, I believe, that a human being can develop in this day and age for the future, which is why I also believe schools will not serve that purpose. They will just destroy our kids to the bone, and they will not be able to prepare the kids for the future that we really need, or people that we really need in the future in the next 50, 100 years. And so this era is so exciting because with all the tools and technology, you can live out your authentic self. And yes, of course, you will be judged on social media. You will have haters and all that stuff if you live out yourself authentically, right? To the T. But at the same time, you have the opportunity to build a really thick skin and really find yourself and that type of fulfillment that maybe our parents never had the chance to, or my grandparents, not to mention that generation, what they had to do, especially the women. If I think about my grandma, what kind of a life she had, if that was her choice and she felt fulfilled, beautiful, I'm happy. But I've seen scenes and things that she uttered, also other women in my family, big family, women, how they have been squeezed into just one particular role and not really having a lot of choice in creating a life that they might have enjoyed by exploring themselves and not being limited to the role of a mother, for example, which is a beautiful role. I'm a mother myself. It is the greatest gift that a woman can have, to be a mother. But at the same time, you are not only a mother, you are also a human being. And exploring that self-awareness space is one of the most fulfilling things, I personally think. And as we were talking about emotions, let's go deeper into that and let's explore what role emotions really play in our journey towards that self-awareness and consciousness expansion.
Right. Yeah, it's a very good point, because emotions are a key. As I mentioned earlier, the emotions are saying something's wrong here, something needs changing. First, we have to be able to hear those emotions. Some people haven't been hearing them for decades and have no idea. They just carry on robotically because this is what the world expects of me, and this is what my family have done or society has done. So who am I to listen to my emotions? It has to be thought, it has to be rationalized, there needs to be a reason. But more and more, the emotions and what we're feeling are a key. One framework that's very interesting to work with is that in terms of frequency, beliefs are the highest frequency, and then to become more dense, then thoughts, then emotions, and then behavior. And they're all connected. So when we do something and it doesn't work out, often that's an opportunity to question it. When we have emotions and they're a bit strange or they feel a bit off, that's an opportunity to question it. And they will lead us back to the belief behind them. So we can always ask, what must I believe about this situation to be feeling this? And that's one of the greatest tools all emotions provide us with. Like, there are no negative emotions, even fear, even guilt, even shame. They all point towards something that wants addressing. And so it's not a bad thing to have these, but it's to learn to work with the communication as opposed to judge the communication. I shouldn't be fearful now. I should just override it. I should just fake it till I make it. But these emotions are speaking to us for a reason, and often very uniquely from individual to individual. So it's not necessarily something you can compare with someone else. It may speak to a very early childhood event, a real anomalous situation from your background, but there's such a gift because they say it's time to stop and listen and, step back and find out what's really happening here. Because usually most of what's happening in our reality, it's all a projection, but it's all a projection of our consciousness. We're walking around our consciousness all the time, but often a lot of it is replays of our childhood. If you look closely enough, you'll see many scenarios and many setups in our life really mirror setups that we had in our childhood. So when the boss suddenly does something, we have a really strong reaction, but we notice no one else does. That's an opportunity to see, why does that speak to me so personally, and everyone else is just waiting till they can leave. That's also a really good marker, is to notice, why am I reacting this way when no one else is? This must speak to me.
And the hardest part about emotions is, like, once you notice them, that's already a great job that you do, right? Becoming aware of them. But then what do you do with it, right? I think that's the step that many people struggle with, me included. I'm a human being as well. So do you have any tips that you could give someone who is struggling with that particular transition from being aware of that emotion? Okay, I figured it out. This is anger now. I'm really angry at whatever, right? And you may be even able to find or pinpoint where this anger is really coming from, maybe even pinpoint it to your past. But now, how can you transition now to a healthy emotional management with that particular emotion?
Yeah, anger's one of them that does need that degree of attention. Well, one thing is, there's no bad emotions, as I said, and also not to stifle them, because many people, if they start on a journey of consciousness expansion or spirituality, they think, I mustn't be angry. But often it needs to be released. And I sometimes say to my clients, just let rip. If it needs to let rip, you'll work out afterwards what happened. But it's far better than keeping it in and going, I must be good, and I must not, address any of these things. If it needs to move, then it needs to move. Its movement may come through expression, but if you're by yourself, there's often deep breathing can really help to center and to come into the present and to be able to step out of the scenario that's triggered it and see what's really going on. Definitely walking in nature, getting some space. You don't have to explain things to people all the time. Sometimes there can be oversharing, which then becomes over-analysis, and then you're getting nowhere with it. It's much more empowering to understand ourselves sometimes, rather than, especially with our closest loved ones, than start digging at it with chopsticks. So there are a number of routes, as I say, to express it, to become quiet, to become still, to remove oneself, and not to judge them, whatever it is. And you can always talk to whoever it is. When I first went through this process and I thought, oh, what's this coming up? I would start to warn people and I go, okay, I'm learning to express my emotions. So right now I'm going to be angry, and I just need to be angry. And then afterwards I'll tell you what I was angry about if I know. And then I would just go. And even that was an expression of my authentic self. I wasn't just keeping it shut down so we could have a polite conversation. I was just going, this is as real and raw as I get. And if they're loved ones, they really understand. But, through this process, having said that, there does start to come a filtering of people, because as you become more connected to your authentic self, the people that you were more, let's say, your artificial self or superficial self with, they start to fall away. Earlier you talked about our generation compared to our parents and grandparents and how much change there is for us. There is one big difference in it being the same for them. There was a certain degree of security or knowing, this is just what we do and we're held by the system. And now we recognize that wasn't necessarily healthy, but they were held by that. And we do have many choices to change and do things differently, but that does often feel like taking a big risk, or walking in paths no one in our families ever walked before, or expressing and communicating things we've never heard anyone communicate before. So there are brave souls all round to come to this planet and to live any life at any time. But I sometimes think 3 generations back, I wonder if they had it harder, because they had to go through the darkest of the dark before we got to this turning point. And as much as we're all going through, it's really on their shoulders that we're able to do that.
Yeah. And coming back to the anger, it really helped me when I figured this out, that it is really not healthy to keep it down, right? Or to stuff it down, to neglect it, or to tell myself, you need to be nice and kind and good all the time. When I figured that puzzle piece out, it helped me really imagine that whenever an emotion is expressed, you really cannot control when or how or what emotion will come up in your body, because this is I feel a very subconscious thing because of your conditioning and how you've experienced life just in general. So whenever that kind of emotion is coming up, and I imagine it as you can imagine it as a sound, right? You can stuff it down, but then it remains inside. So the damage that is done will be inside. And whenever you release that sound, let's say, or that emotion, it can create damage outside of you. So I think what we all need to be aware of or learn is that particular moment when we want to release it. To release it in a way that, as you beautifully described in your example, that it does not hurt the integrity of the other person. So tell them, my God, that makes me so angry, which will not hurt them. They will be informed how you feel, right? And then you can go all about what made you angry. But suppressing it will really create illness inside the body. This is my personal belief, as I've seen so many people do it, especially men. This is my perception. They tend to stuff it down so much, their anger, their frustration, their resentment, and they are afraid to talk about it because they know exactly how their wife will react, how the emotional expression of their wives will kill them, literally will create hell in their lives. So I think this is a call out to all women also to be more conscious of how they are expressing themselves, how they are expressing their negative feelings or the emotions that are so intense that can hurt another person. When we call them names, when we start to say things we don't mean, or to endanger their safety even, right? There are all kinds of variations of how you can play it out, right? When you feel angry. Oh, I will do this, I will do that, right? I will divorce you and what have you, right? And I think it's important to train, to practice that ability to really say, first of all, I'm really angry. And it took me a long time to really say that, because I was so conditioned to keep it inside of myself, to don't say anything, don't do anything, keep it to yourself. Nobody wants to hear that, right? So it took a long time. And I think once you start practicing it with people that you trust, will receive it well and will understand you, that you're going through that kind of process at the moment, you will have then the ability to move to the second step, right? Okay, now I can say I'm angry. Now I can move forward and I can tell you why I'm angry, because that is holding people up so much as well. They are terrified of telling the other person what made them angry. While exactly in that step, I believe, is the true healing and the true consciousness of that relationship, right? Because the relationship also has its own consciousness, if you will.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating process, because in my own, it was suppressed, and then I was single for quite a while, or there were short relationships, but then in a longer term relationship, then you really see stuff. And there was suppressing, and also I just wasn't used to being in such a close, intimate relationship. And then I was holding it in, and then I just thought, I'm just going to let rip, because I don't even know what's here. It's becoming a monster. The more I push it down, it's just becoming a monster. And then I would just let this thing come out so I can see what it is. And then the few times I did that, I could then actually saw, this is how my parents argued. This is where, and I hated it so much when they did it, and I made a conscious, like a vow to myself, I'm never going to do it like that, and so we stuff it down. And then we get older, and then we go, you can't help but repeat them. Unfortunately, we can't help but repeat them. And then I had to see, and then to be able to work with it, and then to reevaluate what was going on when I was a child witnessing them argue. And this is, as I said before, it's never really the immediate scenario. The immediate scenarios are usually triggering the past scenarios where the conditioning started. And then over time, it gets easier to say, I'm feeling really angry now, I need some space. Rather than, I'm feeling really angry now and this is because, and it does get easier and easier. And then you start to recognize the markers in each other. I know they're angry and I know they need some space, or just give me 5 minutes. And usually we're able to, either it can just brush over because you've realized what the thing was and you know it's not so important. And for me, it's often very useful not to feed things. That's why I mention oversharing or overanalyzing can actually feed the thing when we really know this doesn't belong to me. Let's just move on and in the present have our relationship as who we both are as opposed to who they were.
And also keeping kind of the goal of the relationship in mind and not just tear everything apart just because one or both are so angry that they think the relationship is ending now because of those strong feelings. I think this is a tendency of the new age or new generations, because back in the day when like divorce was not even on the table for women, I don't think women would have easily dropped the towel, and said, I'm gone, right? They can say it now, right? Just by minor, and I know I'm getting onto thin ice here, just from minor things, women tend to overreact, me included. So we need to kind of take the time. I think we feel so pressured all the time to solve problems right away. There's no time and it needs to be fixed before XYZ happens or before anybody sees anything, And I think we need to take off that pressure. And I know society puts a lot of pressure on people just in general. I think it's crucial, as you said in the beginning, when there is no space and time that you can take for yourself to process your thoughts and your emotions, like you will not move things forward. You will be stuck in that rat race, stuck in that emotional race your whole life. And when you never take the time to actually stop and think, do you really want that? Do you actually want to continue doing this for the next 50 years? Then I think many people would stop and say, hell no. This is not what I want. This is not how I want to be. This is not how I want to show up. And this is a trigger moment that I think is so crucial for everyone to notice and to instill and implement in their lives, to have that switch. Nope, I take time off now for a minute, for 5, be it a whole day, be it a whole week if you need that, right? And just being unapologetic. I hear that word so much. But then again, they are not unapologetic when it comes to the real important stuff that they talk about. Women empowerment here, and I'm a queen and this and that. But are you really unapologetically following your values and your gut feeling and your instincts as a woman and as a human being? And oftentimes it's a no. It's just something that they say because it's cool, because it's trendy right now. But when it comes to a burning house, would they go into the burning house and save those they say they love? Oftentimes it's a no, because they fear their makeup will be, off, or their hair will be ruined. That's a very superficial example, but it can be applied to every deep and sophisticated situation that we are going through in life. And I think and that was a crucial moment for myself when I became a digital nomad, actually. Before that, I was just the same. talking stuff that I don't mean, that I would never do, but complaining about things, right? About behavior that other people's had or my own behavior, but really being completely behind your own words is something that I only learned when I became a digital nomad, where I was 100% responsible for every single move that I made as a single mom with 2 kids traveling around the world. That is a tough situation where you had to build a business at the same time. And I think only taking that time, which I'm so grateful for, that it was possible, allowed me to really take space and time to think about my life. How do I want to live? And how can I remove myself from all those ugly pressures that people, society put on me? And of course, not everybody can be a digital nomad. I realize that not everybody wants to be. I still believe we have the power. And I still believe that women especially have the greatest power to change things. And that goes back into the awareness and consciousness part that you work so tremendously on.
I was just going to say, I travelled a long period, and I found the same. What you were saying with the digital nomad, I found that the title wasn't there back when I did it, but that really helped me, because every decision was my own. Every outcome was my responsibility. And it was wonderful for that. And I go, again, I know not everyone can do it, but I do recommend travel, even for short periods, and not necessarily where everything's organised for you. If you can, just do 2 weeks where you know where you land and then when you leave. That will give you a very good snippet. I was talking to someone recently, someone who's teaching me German, who said that he had learned to travel that way. Although he can't travel constantly, he now books his inward flight and his exit flight, and then just arrives and take it day by day. And that's a fantastic exercise. You know, you don't have to go for years. You can just go through that shorter process.
And it also takes away all the fear. I remember how much fear I had when I was living in Germany. Like, everything was like fear-based for me. I honestly don't know any other human being that was so afraid of so many things, and making that decision to not even plan anything, but just book the first ticket for the train, and just go, right, to the first destination. Not having a plan at all. That was not at all me, and my parents were shocked, of course. They didn't know, who is that girl? What is she doing? But that was so crucial for me to really release myself of the fear that I had from everything that was around me, and not feeling really like being myself and making decisions based on my own values and based on my own boundaries that I had, what I felt I had. And I know you talk a lot about multidimensional self. What does that really mean?
Well, carrying on from this conversation of authentic self, and the authentic self being a pathway to the soul, as an expression of the soul, multidimensional self, even just to recognize that we have a soul, that means it's a part of us that exists in another dimension to this one that we have here. So even just that starts to awaken us. So even just the search for authentic expression, you come to, that means our soul, our spirit. And then the further you go, people start to notice past lives, past life impressions, things that are happening to them that are not connected to their scenarios from their younger childhood. And they can't see the pattern anywhere. If they look back, it's not there. It's something very unique to them and their own journey. And then from that place, we start to explore parallel lives, which are all in different dimensions. And then if you want, you can explore lives on other planets and the origin from source and how you split off. But that we exist on these multiple planes all at once. And that, I think, is also a useful way to come out of being so attached to this identity, because we realize as the bigger picture you get, and the broader perspective you get, you realize we're just here passing through for such a short space of time, but we carry on. We existed before and we will exist after, all in other dimensions. And so I'm noticing, and I think other people are too, with more plant medicine, psychedelics, and all the different healing treatments, that they're awakening to more parts of themselves. And it's taking psychology further than just early life conditioning, and that there are these other inputs from other dimensions that also affect and have created who we are and influence why we're here, and the choices we made to come here, and the experiences we signed up for with our parents, with our partners, with our children, pets, etc.
Now, you mentioned the importance of duality and the other in personal evolution. Can you elaborate on how understanding and embracing these concepts can lead to greater self-awareness and understanding, as well as harmony?
Yeah, it goes back to the perspective that all parts are in the one. And also there's a saying, source, there was just the one source, and then source split itself to know itself. So, in other words, everything that around us that we perceive as other is an extension of ourselves. Yeah. And so then everything is always helping us understand ourselves, either through resonance or, yes, they're triggering us, but actually it's a soul contract because it's really helpful because now I can understand this in myself. But even just in reflection and putting together a greater understanding of who we are, all those others aren't really others. And there's this famous quote from a guru in India, Ramana Maharshi. Somebody said to him, "How should we treat others?" And his answer was, "There are no others." We're constantly interacting with ourselves. And then the more you work with that notion, it becomes very interesting, because someone may say something to you that maybe hurts or is strange or unusual or is like it comes out of nowhere. But if you stop for a moment and think, well, if that person's me, why would I say that to me? Because there's nothing random. It all has to be connected. So it then forces us to slow down and look at the experiences that we want to separate as belonging to others. And we then start taking even greater ownership of all that we are, because it's everything that we experience. We are the creators of our entire reality, including all the other characters that show up in our play. They're all part of our same play that we wrote, we direct. We're the leading star, but we're also the small parts that walk in and walk off. Like we mentioned earlier in the conversation, just how one conversation with someone can change so much. Like at a bus stop, you might be waiting, someone says something and it's just like, for 2 or 3 days. And it's like, that's part of me that needed me to hear that. And you start to see life as being more interconnected all the time. It's not just the person at the bus stop, it's happening all the time with everything. And that's where we have synchronicities, and they really speak to us because, wow, that really spoke to me as me.
Would that also mean that based on that, the only relationship we could ever have is the one with ourselves, and we would never really have a relationship with anyone else or with others?
Well, it's why the relationship with ourselves is so important, because we're going to meet ourselves wherever we go. I used to say that about parents. I say, get to know your parents really well because you're going to meet them wherever you go. But that's only because your parents are part of you. And we chose those particular parents in that particular scenario because our soul needed that precise setup for what we came into this life for. And so whenever we meet them again and again, there's more for us there to understand about the theme, because it's fueling our evolution. It's helping us grow. It's not there just to piss us off. It's there for us to, to process, and then we go to a new stage with it and a new awareness that, especially if we have children, or even if, my clients are kind of like an extension, but we pass on what we've learned so that they don't have to go through that, or with our awareness, we make it hopefully easier for them.
Can you remember any scenario in your life where you met a part of yourself that inspired yourself or was really astounding for you?
The memory that comes to mind is I spent a lot of time in Peru doing ayahuasca with a shipibo in the jungle, and I mean, I'm not sure I'd ever been as intimate with myself as in those ceremonies. But years later, I was still doing ayahuasca for a number of years. I was thinking, what is it about, especially that tribe and the ayahuasca from that part of the world? And I remember the first time I arrived there, I felt like I recognized the land. But I remember seeing myself from another lifetime as this old Shipibo woman. And I would keep coming, and And it was just like, I'm revisiting some part of me, and it called me back. I knew it so well. It's a little bit like the word consciousness. As a child, I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I needed to know more. First time I heard ayahuasca, I didn't know what it was, but I knew I needed to know more. And that kind of was a thread that pulled me back to an old part of myself from another life. And it's beautiful to make those connections with our other lives, our multidimensional selves, the clues we left behind so that we would find our way back home in this lifetime. And just that puts the awe into life and into every day, because you just see this whole fabric just working and moving and changing and forming and reforming. And that's what I love doing. I'd say to the truest knowing of who we are. You know, when you peel back the identity and you peel back the layers, we always feel so much better because we feel more at home in ourselves. We're not compromising who we are. This is just purely who I am. Feeling angry, feeling sad, feeling grumpy, feeling like it's just me. That's just how I feel. And to increasingly be okay with all aspects of oneself. And knowing that we're all human, in that we all have shadow, we all have themes we've come here to explore. We're all doing our best through extraordinary times, hurtling towards a future that no one can predict. And to feel at home in oneself, I think that sets you up for the journey. It's like you have your spaceship, you've got your throttle, your cockpit, you're accountable, you're in charge of all the buttons and switches, and you're ready for the ride.
That could almost be the final word for this podcast, but I have one question left that I would love to know. You have worked with so many different clients throughout your work. Can you share one success story that inspired you the most or that impacted you the most?
They're all amazing. I mean, I'm not sure I can choose one. I can just say that in my job, I'm in awe of how much people have lived through. And the people that come to work on themselves and are prepared to walk the path less traveled and to clear it up, to understand it, if they want to go on to help other people. But, my parents, they had a very tough life and brought me to a place, and I had a tough life, and you find out more and more people had tough lives. But it's quite an honor and a privilege to work with people having empathy and compassion for how much they've experienced and their parents have experienced without knowing what they've experienced, and their grandparents, as I was saying earlier, 3 generations back, what they've lived through to get to where we are today. And we have the people in the present that say a lot of this stuff is not going beyond my generation. It stops with me, and I'm going to do the transformational work. And the bravery it takes to unpack it all. And often there's not more than one in the family. It's often usually one or just a couple if you're lucky. But that they're working with that whole organism of the ancestral line, the bloodline, the culture. Working through it. So the successes kind of comes every week, every 2 weeks, with a new realization, prepared to do things differently, prepared to take the family line in a new direction, prepared to face the odds, to face themselves. And that inspires me. It's not so much a success story, I suppose. It's my awe at the human journey and the people alive at this time, the souls that have come here to do what we're all doing. It's huge. So, my success story is probably, I'd finished really. The success story, I guess, is to see them transformed, to see them think for themselves, to see them make their own decisions, to see them choose the lives that they want to live regardless. The word unapologetically, getting to the place where they can do it unapologetically and just forge ahead, is an inspiration to witness all the time.
And finding that balance, if we speak about unapologetically, right? Because women have the tendency to apologize like every second for everything that they do. Now, maybe less than maybe a couple of years ago, but at the same time, not going also in the vicious direction, I would call it, where they are so unapologetically that they are not paying attention to their surrounding anymore. And so they are just expressing themselves, which is so fostered nowadays. This type of you can express yourself, there will be no consequences, whatever you do, you can do whatever you want, there will be no repercussions. This is also a dangerous direction, and I think there needs to be a balance somewhere. Or maybe that's my personal view on things, that there needs to be a balance. Maybe that's my mistake in thinking so. But I think safety is really in balance. Whenever you are in imbalance, you are creating an unsafe environment for yourself and the ones that are maybe dependent on you. Let's say your kids or your family, your partner. So finding a balance, at least in my perspective, makes total sense. Not going from one extreme to the other based on your own story and value system, not what the world wants you to balance to, right? So it needs to be coming from your authentic self, as we have discussed here. And at the same time, finding the edges of that authentic self, because it cannot go infinitely into one direction.
I think you're very right. This is a really important point, because I think when we first start to awaken, we have a lot of anger at how much we've been suppressed. And so that often comes out. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do this and going to say this. But then, so that's the initial stage. But then the more we process, we realize you have to come to a point where you realize we're all connected. So if I'm suffering, they must be suffering. And if I'm hurting, they are. And so I'm not in an isolation from them. And so there's a huge part of, once we awaken, how do we communicate in a more refined way? Once we've started dealing with anger, usually there's a huge amount of anger at authority that's really in the early stages that we have to move through, because otherwise we never step into our own authority, because we're just putting the whole notion of authority down. But we then have to step into our own authority, and with that comes accountability, which includes being accountable for whether or not we're causing whoever we're engaging with any suffering or pain. So we're accountable for that. So we can't disconnect ourselves from the environment. And then over the years, and still continuing to find the right language, neutral language, if there's been a pattern of blaming or shaming, to revisit that, to neutralize that. How do I express what I need to express without blame, but understanding this person? You just need to hear my perspective. It's my perspective, and it's equally as valid as their perspective. And so I think that we're still in an ongoing journey with that. And as communication keeps changing, and it's so rapidly changing, we still have a long way to go. You can see that with social media, like who's writing what and for what reason. What do they want to gain from that? What's the impression they want to give of themselves? How true is that to themselves? And so and if anyone's regularly on social media, it's something I think we all have a responsibility to regularly review. What am I actually saying here? Am I actually got a grudge that I want to share with people, or to blame onto people, or do I just want to give something that could be useful to them? Why? And so that's the whole awareness, mindfulness. Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Exactly what you're just describing is something that I see on a daily basis on social media. Whenever I engage in conversations, I almost regret it immediately when I see the first reply to what I have contributed, which I always try to make it as fruitful as possible for this conversation that is happening. But I do notice that there is a lot of anger, that they just want to vent, that they are so pissed about their lives, that their lives are not going as they want it to go, that they have maybe they had a bad day, right? It's all understandable. I'm not even holding a grudge against all those people who might have overstepped their communication lines with me. But I think it's really crucial that we call them out on it. And whenever I do, I get even more like shitload of stuff on me, and there's so much resentment, right? The inability of people to look at themselves and really analyze what they have just done and admit it. It's such a difficult step, is what I notice. I'm not talking about apologizing. I'm not a person who is for apologizing. Like saying sorry is meaningless to me personally. But having the ability to analyze yourself and having some level of consciousness and awareness about what you just said. And if you really contributed to a beautiful conversation, or whether you just wanted to kill me off, right? To erase my authority in this conversation. And this is something that, like, the conversation is dead in the moment where someone else tries to erase you, your authority, your integrity, and the experience that you are having. And I think social media is toxic because you are not looking the other person in the eye. You are not in the presence of their energy, which is why you allow yourself to expand your own energy onto the entire space, and you believe this is the only energy that counts right now. And I think this is a bit egoistic to perform or to conduct yourself in such way. And it is very tempting. I do admit that on social media, you're so tempted to go really into rage mode and show yourself from your worst side. Because it's, even if your profile picture is visible, people can go onto your profile, they can see who you are, right? And they will talk bad about you if you had a bad opinion about something. Still, people do this, even though you can go to their profiles, you can see who they are. And I think it would be a beautiful transformation to see for the entire human race, I believe, if people become more conscious of what they're actually doing, that the energy they put into the words that they are typing, that this energy is received on the other end. That this energy is actually either creating a flower in the heart of the person, or it is killing the flower that is currently growing in the heart of that person. As you said, we are all connected, and the words that we speak, whether we write them, whether we speak them, they all carry energy, and they have a vibration, they have a frequency, and it is 100% received on the other end. And you have to ask yourself, as I had to ask myself when I was around 12, what kind of a human being do I want to be? Because I was on the edge, on the border. I was in Germany. I was miserable. I was depressed to no end. And I felt this evil pulling me in to becoming the worst human being you can imagine, because of all the experiences that I took as an excuse to allow myself to go there mentally, right? I didn't do anything bad, but mentally, even thinking about bad stuff, right? And so I think every day you just have to make that decision. What kind of human being do you want to be? Do you want to grow a garden in your own heart and in the hearts of others? Or do you want to be the destroyer of all the gardens that you see? And I think this is a crucial decision that we need to make every day. And I celebrate your work for that, because you don't make excuses. You made even a profession out of it. You go into it. You face the things that might be uncomfortable, and you help your clients go through the same and help them regain or gain and become aware of the things that might not go well, and how to actually restructure their lives to actually live a fulfilling life.
Yeah, there's so much change right now, and people are at so many different levels of awareness. And at the moment, I just think we just got to keep persevering and not get too distracted and just keep going, because I think we've got more shifts coming ahead in the next 2 years, 5 years. It's all going to keep shifting. And yeah, on social media, I just try and work with it very loosely. It was I had quite a crash course in it. I've only really been posting consistently since January, so it's 4 or 5 months. But I had to find my way and learn to step back, and people would post really strange things, as comments on a post, and I didn't even have the words to reply. But so you kind of navigate it and then just keep going. It's all got to work by resonance. I just keep attracting the people I want to attract, and the people I don't will eventually just let them fall away. It's fine. Yeah. I keep thinking about the coaches of the future. They're going to have to work with people growing up during social media, and so much clearing up to do with everything that happened with social media. Yeah, I already see it with some of my younger clients. Yeah, but that's for another day.
And all the children, right, that grow up with devices and less human connection. I really wonder how that will turn out in the sense of human interaction, and how those generations will really build a future, how that will look like. And I'm kind of a little bit of terrified, to be honest, because I think the less you are connected with yourself and with other human beings, it will be a very aggressive way of interacting with others, because you will not respect yourself, your own boundaries, your own identity. So why would you respect those of others, right? You will trample on them, right? You will go overboard as much as you want, as much as you can. And we can already see that development, the not paying attention really, not to older people, not to pregnant women, not to very small children or animals, for example. So I see that dying off slowly, and it is a new way of treating each other, which really honestly makes me really sad to see, because those were the values that I grew up with and I cherished so much, and I want them back. Like, why can it not be a reality everywhere? If it was possible in that little village where I grew up, why is it not possible in a bigger spectrum or in a bigger space? It must be possible, but that also requires people to want it. And I think people just want different things now. It is freedom, it is independence, it is financial gain, right? It is all types of things, but certainly not that type of human connection that I experienced as a kid.
Yeah, the pot's being stirred. And I hope we will learn from what comes to the surface what our next steps really need to be as we shape a new world. But at the moment, there's a lot of stirring things up from the bottom of the pot and seeing what's really there. That's why the leaders of the future, the next generations, are so important. Everyone is, but the people that will make some big decisions.
They are particularly, is there something in neuroscience that you are very excited about in the future?
When I walked away, I still keep my eye on it. There's a work, some material I like to read, which is the Wingmakers material. Well, they talk about the real turning point is called the Great Portal, and that will be when we have scientific proof of the soul. And that will be a major turning point on the planet and for consciousness. We're going to have to reevaluate everything. And that would be very good for us to do. I think we're already doing it. Everyone that goes through some coaching, mentoring, healing journey, they reevaluate everything that they are. And I think eventually more people that are doing that eventually will get to a tipping point where collectively we all have to reevaluate where we came from, how we're here, what we've done to get here. And therefore, from that place, really know how to create the future that we want. Yeah, so in terms of your question from neuroscience, not neuroscience specifically, but science, I'm interested to see as we get closer to that point. Because scientific proof of the soul is also scientific proof of the multidimensional self. It's scientific proof that it's just not the 3 or 4 dimensions. It says there's so much more to who we all are. And that will be enormous.
And would you say that by finding that scientific proof of soul, would that change the perspective on religion?
Yes, it's a huge... Well, is religion... It depends, I can speak to 10 Christians and 10 Christians have a different perspective on Christianity. It's the same on spiritual. Everyone's got their own perspective. So I'm not sure. It can be, because... As far as I understand, some religions have cut out the idea of reincarnation or have cut out the idea of life after death. Once we start to prove that there's life after death, then what have you been telling us all this time? And why have you been telling us that? And that would be enormous. I think the main goal is that we all think for ourselves. And some people can do that within the framework of religion, and other people, they take on information without really, it's critical thinking. We can't lose our ability to critically think, although to some degree it has been lost across the planet. But that's the thing we really have to cultivate, is to keep asking questions. We can't just take everything we fed and believe it. That's ridiculous. That's usually the wake-up call, is you realise, what am I believing? What am I thinking? This is all nonsense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up, and it doesn't work. I have to find another way. And usually then the door opens.
That's a funny and tricky situation that you're mentioning to get there. At the one hand, you could possibly do it alone. But my belief nowadays is I was a loner for the most part of my life, and I thought, well, I can do it all by myself. I can figure it out, right? I don't need nobody. But now, for the last couple of years, I have come to realize that, also because of what we have discussed, right, that you meet yourself constantly in the eyes of the others, right, or how you interact with others, that I believe that this kind of shift can be sped up by meeting as many people as possible, by being safe, of course, also, and experiencing yourself with other people. Because you can be by yourself, meditate 100 hours, and you will never realize certain things or come to the answer of a question all by yourself. Now, books can be a really great source to get your mind going, but I think the real transformation, or the fast transformation, can only take place when you are in conversation, in an authentic conversation with another human being, which I'm trying to foster on this podcast, which really can spark the mind in thinking differently, in asking yourself, how do I relate to this? How do I want to continue with this information? How can I incorporate this information in my life if that has become significant to me? And we have not enough authentic conversations, is what I'm feeling. Because people are hiding behind their masks, behind their roles, behind their characters, the personas that they've developed. And yes, there are lots of authentic people, of course. But at the same time, I think the majority struggles with that because of all the fear that is out there in the world, right? Which is purposely placed. You should be in fear constantly because you can be controlled easiest when you are fearing everything and you don't take any bold steps in your life. And is there a method or a practice that you incorporate in your life that helps you maintain authentic conversations with other people, to grow as a mentor yourself, as a woman, as a leader?
I think increasingly we're moving towards community. There are these 3 stages that are talked about. You know, we go from dependence to independence to interdependence. Dependence on the system. Like I was saying, 30, 40 years ago, you were just dependent on the system to tell you what to do and how to live. And then there was this real passage of, but it also, that's kind of a macrocosm. On a microcosm, there's the child who is dependent on the mother. And then you get the independent stage of the teenager, the young adult who wants to go out in the world and find out who they are without all of that influence from home, and to be independent. And then once they've really nurtured that state of being able to look after themselves, being accountable for themselves, I think it's then to take it with other like minds and foster with people who share the same vision, and to work together to grow or build or whatever they want to do together. So that leads me to, in my own life, I work with my clients, and I'm also building my online school, The White Rabbit Reveals, and want to have a space where people can have conversations. And we have regular monthly group calls, and there are more group calls in different ways, and retreats, and ways that we can all connect together and share ideas and share experiences, and a place that you feel home. So once we found home within ourselves, and we found that vibration, we find others who've got some aspect of that vibration and come together. And then I think more of that will happen in the future. And I think that aligns with what is said about the Aquarian age. For example, that the Piscean age was all about following. We followed Buddha, we followed Christ. That's kind of a dependency. And then we're in this huge shift to going, Buddha and Christ are inside of you. Now work with each other as Buddha and Christ's everywhere. So that's the huge transition of this shift. But that's how I see it, broadly speaking, is we're moving towards interdependence. And along the way, we find there is maybe more healing to do with group dynamics that come from early family dynamics, usually. But that is the direction we have to go in. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing more political systems switching from just being bipartisan. It's getting tiring now. I mean, nothing's changing there. It just seems to be getting worse. But there are a few countries, Switzerland included, where there's just more debate. I'm not saying they've got it sorted here either, but we all have to change this duality, this right and wrong. And if I'm right, they have to be wrong. And if I'm superior, they have to be inferior. It's the story has run its time, and we really have to be opening our minds up to other ways to do things, and that involves collaborating and respecting each other.
I honestly see a type of future in that sense that it will change so dramatically, political, economical, and all that stuff, that it may even be run by AI completely, because people will believe that there will be more equality, there will be your voice will be heard more, blah, blah, all that stuff. At the same time, I think that with that type of freedom that is then sold to us, we will also be very, very restricted. This is the big shift that I see. On one hand, this independence, as you say, you will lose your privacy a lot. There will be no privacy. I mean, not now, there's not a lot of privacy, and we are allowing this, right? We are even crying for it, right? Social media, we need more platforms. We want to communicate, we want to talk, right? We want to share, we want to express ourselves, right? But where's all that expressing going to? Honestly, all the free platforms, where's all that information going to? Into the development of a system that will control you even more, that will take away your privacy, that will take away your freedom. And I don't want to sound negative, but this is the type of duality that I personally see in the future. And there might be some paradise havens outside of that, which I intend to create, hopefully. But this is the general move that I see, that people will rave about so much. They will cry for it. For that type of development. And also what I see in women, the type of independence that I see from women nowadays scares the hell out of me. That they are crying for the independence of being a mother. Being independently from the child that they give birth to, that they don't want anymore, right? They don't want to have any kids anymore, for example, which for some women is understandable. If biologically it is not possible, it's not possible, right? But this almost forceful thinking or urge to free yourself from, and this is a biological thing. I don't know if you can free yourself from that, right? The biological role that you have as a woman, the possibility of having kids at least. The cry to make yourself independent will lead, and is already leading, to the reality that women will not have any kids anymore. And I'm really worried that my kids are the last generation of real human beings, because where it is heading with all that type of independence that people are crying for is that we will have robo-humans, that those humans will be produced by robots and AI systems in robo facilities, which apparently already exist. Are already in the works, and they will sell it as, we can nurture the baby much better than the woman can, right? We can have all the vitamins, all the blah blah that the baby needs, and it will be fostered much better than you can, right? And you are free, you can work, you can pay your taxes, blah blah. There will be an agenda behind it, and this is dangerous. Like those 3 stages, I believe in all those 3 stages, you can make major mistakes and driving the entire human race against the wall. Like with the dependence, you can make major mistakes. With the independence, you can make even more mistakes, right? And with the interdependence, I think you can burn the whole place down if you go in the wrong direction. And I find it very scary, to be honest. I find humans the most attractive living being, right? To interact with, to talk to be with. And if I imagine that I will not have the ability to talk to a real human being anymore because they have been produced by some robot facility factory, they will be thinking differently. This will not be a human being anymore because, as you said, the soul, I don't think there will be a soul in those types of machines. I don't know if you could call it human even, right? So this is a debate that we will have in 10 years tops. This will be a reality, I believe. And speaking about soul and the humanness and what is left of us, are you scared of those times? Do you think in the same realms?
No, I don't think the same way. I think there may be events in before the next 10 years that will start to change direction. I think it's, even this summer, the next couple of years, there are big changes ongoing, and I have real trust in a really different solution. There are many ways to look at it. In a way, we each have our own perspective of reality, you and I, and you have your world and I have my world, and we have very different worlds. But I think we're preparing for beings, hybrid beings. I believe in a positive future, and I just hold that image of a positive future so that that's what's created, and that's what I build towards. And very similar to how I described on social media, I don't get distracted by I won't allow myself to be distracted by there's some negative stuff, there's some really nasty stuff. You can see like real battlefields going on in some threads. I just keep clear of it all. And there's quite a training in itself to just go, I'm just going to focus on the reality I want to see, and everything else can do what it wants. That's what I'm working towards. If I didn't believe in that, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing.
Well, for me, it is like a warning sign. If I feel this might be a future that we are headed towards, and that has always been kind of the structure of my mind, seeing both the negative and the positive. Not much gray matter in between, to be honest. That is something that I'm working on to kind of find that bridge, but it gives me enormous drive. To be honest, if I see this could be a dangerous path that we're moving towards, I see people like sheep just falling off the cliff. And maybe that's judgmental of me, but so be it. I need to make sure that whatever I do, it's not a waste of time. Not one single second is a waste of time. That I don't allow myself to overthink, overjudge, overdo anything, but really be laser focused on what do I want to achieve in this world to prevent this type of outcome. Or at least for those who don't want that outcome, because obviously if that outcome will be reality, a lot of people have voted for it, right? And this is a reality that I need to live with. That many people, the majority, might vote for that directly and indirectly by just being silent, and not doing anything, or just being lazy, The other direction is what I want to head towards. Because as I spoke about balance, if this is such a heavy stone hanging over our heads, I need to make sure that my stone is as heavy at least to keep the balance. So this is kind of the idea that I'm having, and this is also the goal or the idea why I'm doing this podcast, talking with people who are like-minded, who are moving towards the same direction, because that is the weight that I want to build.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, it's a really good point. We can see what the threat is and use that to drive us even more towards what we prefer. The more inauthentic posts, the more I'm going to speak my truth. The more blah, 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 the more I'm going to cut to the chase. And I just keep using it like that, like they say, learning by contrast. I don't want this is what I prefer, so that's what I'm going to create more of, and just do more of it. Yeah. So it's wonderful to share this space with you and to share parallel paths towards the future we want to create, where people can express themselves authentically and share our visions and work towards the world that we would all prefer to see come into form.